Hello, everyone, and welcome to SCORE Fairfield County's live webinar on how to use Google Forms to increase the efficiency of your business. I'm Bob Hogan, the webinar coordinator today and a business mentor here at SCORE in Fairfield County. And I'm going to be your host. Our presenter is Nalini Goolsarran, and more on Nalini in just a minute, but first a few brief words on SCORE. SCORE is a nonprofit national partner of the SBA. And locally here in Fairfield County, we have over 130 volunteers with a wide range of industry, process, and subject matter expertise. And we offer three primary value-added services to small business owners. The first is free one-on-one counseling, which we can obtain either by video, telephone, email. And you can access that by clicking on the bit.ly link that you see on the screen, or you can go to our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org, and click on Request a Mentor. We also offer educational workshops and webinars like the one today, about 150 throughout the year in a wide range of business topics. And lastly, we offer extensive resources on our website, and you can also have access to subject matter experts from our website. Our next live webinar will be next Tuesday, October the 6th at noon, and the topic is Beyond the Business Card Exchange, especially in a virtual world, with Rob Thomas presenting. And again, you can find more specifics on next week's webinar on our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org. Also on our website, you'll be able to access a wide range of archived webinars that you can access on demand at any particular time, and you may find those valuable for your business. We have set aside time for Q&A today. During the presentation, we're going to stop at a couple of intervals and take your questions. But you can pose those questions at any time by using the chat window, and you can access that chat window by hovering on the bottom of your screen and clicking on chat. And again, you can ask the question at any time during the webinar. We will end the webinar at 1 p.m. to respect your time today, and it is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be available on our website within about the next 48 hours or so. It's now my great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Nalini Goolsarran. Nalini is the founder of EdgeSpace Marketing and has a passion for transforming business practices and streamlining communications. She has a bachelor's degree in computer information systems and over 10 years of experience in information technology, project management, and communications. Before becoming an entrepreneur, Nalini was an associate COO for a division of a global financial institution. Currently, she provides website development, social media marketing, and SEO services to small business and nonprofits. I'll now turn it over to Nalini. Nalini, it's all yours.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you, Bob. So today, as we talked about, we're going to go over Google Forms and how Google Forms can work for your business. So a couple things we're going to cover today are your Google Form features, understanding how the synced Google Sheets work for the responses, use cases and examples for how you can use Google Forms, general overview of Zapier for automation. And before we go ahead, I just wanted to kind of let you know how today is going to work. As Bob mentioned, we are going to stop at intervals for questions at any time, put them in the chat window. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to present for probably about 15 minutes to give you a general idea of the various features and tools. And then we're going to go into some live demos. So I'm going to build some Google Forms with you here. And that should give you a better idea and give you a sense of how you can use Google Forms. So let's talk about how Google Forms can help you and your business. So you can build forms that are filled out online. Now, Google Forms itself gives you a URL that you will send to your clients or your customers, your staff, whoever your audience is. If you're a little more tech savvy, you can also embed that Google form on your website, or your web developer can do that. You can get notifications when the forms are filled out. This can be a little tricky to configure, and we'll take a look at that together when we get into the demos. And you can then view the information through the Google form itself, but sometimes it's a lot easier to actually look at it in the Google Sheet. And in a little bit, we'll get into the Google Sheet. For those who aren't familiar with it, it is the Google version of Excel. So most of us know Excel as the spreadsheet application, and so Google Sheets is an online version of that. So let's look at how you create a new form. It's as easy as 7 steps. You visit forms.google.com, and then you would click the plus sign to create a new form. I know that sounds very simplistic, but when we get into the demo, you'll see there's a big giant plus sign. You can't miss it for how to create your new form. You would give your form a title. You then add your questions. And when you get into the questions, there's all kinds of options around whether it's a fill in the blank, is it a drop down, multiple choice, a paragraph, is it required, not required. You can add as many as you need, take out what you don't. You can even create pages so that if you have, let's say, 40 questions and you don't want to overwhelm everyone, you can break them up into pages depending on what you're doing. And then when you're done, at any point, you can go to the responses tab to see all the responses. And then from there is where you would create your synced spreadsheet. You can create this after responses come in. You can create it ahead of time. The responses will always be in your Google form, but this is just giving you a sense of it's there and it's ready for you when the time comes. And then as you're building your form, you can review your form using the preview. And it's an eyeball. Unfortunately, it really is an eyeball that you would use to actually preview your form. And then lastly, when you're done, you copy your form URL and you can share it via email. You can also have it on your website. There's a couple different ways that you can do that. I've seen where that URL is embedded on a button on the website and the button brings you just to the Google form page. Other times the form itself is embedded on your website and so people can fill it out right from the website without having to go anywhere. It all depends on what's easier for you when it comes to web work. For your email, again, you can just drop the link right in an email, a text message, or however you want to communicate that link to your audience. So talk a little bit about the Google Sheets and what that means. As I mentioned earlier, Google Sheets is similar to Microsoft Excel. Each question in the form is a corresponding column in the Google Sheet. So what's nice about Google Forms is that when you create the form with, let's say, like we said earlier, 40 questions, you don't then have to manually go aggregate that data in a spreadsheet. Your synced Google Sheet will aggregate that data for you by collecting it in the corresponding column. When we get into the demo, you'll see what that looks like. It comes in really handy when you have a team of people or someone else that you're working with on that information. You can work together with them in real time without having to worry about the old version of the spreadsheet or that emails were missed and some information wasn't entered. You can see the Google Sheet in real time at any time, so you can see all the responses. You have immediate access to the drafts and updated information. Now, you necessarily won't be updating the spreadsheet yourself, but you will see every time the survey or the form was filled out. This helps to reduce confusion with older version of files. I don't know about you, but oftentimes when I work in teams and you're working on a file with someone before this shared functionality, you're emailing the form back and forth, the file, and there's a chance that you're working off of version 2 and somebody's working off of 2.5 and then there's misinformation. So this helps to solve for that. And as I mentioned earlier, this minimizes the risk of lost emails or mistakes during data collection. Before Google Forms or online forms, you might have had them fill out something that was like an online form, but then you manually had to take that information and put it in a spreadsheet. And then sometimes you have mistakes or something was missed. We have a question in the chat that I think is a good question to actually take now. The Google Sheet data refresh. Do you have to push a button or does it just appear? The answer is it just appears. As the information is entered on the form, the Google Sheet is updated. I'm going to say almost immediately. I'm sure there's a 1 to 2 minute delay, but it's almost immediately the responses appear in the spreadsheet. And then you can take that information in terms of the spreadsheet and you can only share it with who you need to. So folks filling out the form does not see other responses. Only you and whoever has the link to the spreadsheet, as with Google Sheets, has access to it. So just a really quick thing about Google Sheets is you create Google Sheets as linked to your Gmail account, and then you can share that sheet with anyone who has the link or only specific people. You can keep that information as private as needed. So what are some common use cases for Google Forms that you would need to gather information? I get this question often. Why would I need it? So here's some examples. You can gather information from new clients. I personally do it. When I first started my business, I would have a notebook. We all have our client notebooks. That was my chicken scratch handwriting, where I could sometimes not read my own handwriting. I may have spelt a name wrong. I got an address slightly off, or I might not have everything I need to build contracts and invoicing. And now I have all new clients must fill out the intake form. And that way it's in the spreadsheet, and I'm just copy and pasting from the spreadsheet into my contracts. There's no misinformation. There's no mistakes with name spellings, and I have everything that I need. I've also found, just for me, for my business model, that it does weed out clients who aren't serious. I mean, everybody's at different stages with their businesses, and sometimes they're just looking for information and not really ready to move forward. So this way I don't spend time building contracts for clients who aren't in a position or aren't ready yet to move forward. They fill out the form when the time is right for them. So that's helped me in 2 different ways improve my business efficiency. You can use Google Forms for surveys, where you gather feedback from customers on your product or service. This, again, because it's a link, you can have a pre-form email ready to go that whenever you finish an interaction with a client, and you can send them the survey. Think about any time you call customer service, oftentimes an email comes almost right away for us to fill out a survey. You can use it to manage customer service requests. Now, for businesses where clients need to put in tickets or they have issues and you're fielding them, this is a good way to manage them and assign them if you have a team of people that need that information or that you need to manage who's doing what. It's another way to track what's happening. I don't know about you, but I get inundated with emails. So it's a great way to keep track of what are some of the outstanding tasks that still need to be done. You can collect registrations for an event or a conference. Now, when I say collect registration, I want to be very clear that this is not a payment processing solution. You can gather the information of the registrant. So if it's a free event or you just want to gather their name and information, you can do that. And if you need to process payment, you have to handle that separately. So I just want to repeat, Google Forms is not a payment processing solution. It doesn't have that capability. And it's not something that you would use for that. You could use some other software for payment processing. You can survey then your attendees at the end of the event. Usually at the end of a SCORE workshop, you get a survey that says, what did you think of the presenter? What did you think about the information? Those type of thing. And then SCORE can use that information to either improve their services or add to it. And you can do the same for your business if it's worthwhile. You can also conduct market research. Now, as a digital marketer, this is very important. Oftentimes, you have a product, you think everybody likes it, but you're not really sure. And so Google Forms allows you to send your questions to focus groups and gather information on how you develop your new products. It could even give you an insight of how you market those new products when you think of your target audience. So you can really use it to hone in on what is it that you want to get your message about or how it's used. You can ask participants to vote on contest entries. So sometimes we see things like in the UK a couple years ago, they had all citizens vote on what the name of their new boat for their naval fleet was. I don't know if you guys know that, then you end up with Bodie McBoatface. So that's one way where it can go wrong if you allow them to, fill in the blank. And this is where you can either give them pre-filled answers and it's just kind of a multiple choice question. So when we get into the demo, you can see how you customize that. I want to take the question that just came through the chat because it's very important. Google Forms is not HIPAA compliant. If you need a HIPAA compliant solution, there are other solutions out there, paid solutions. JotForms, JOTFORMS is a HIPAA compliant solution. You need a paid plan in order to use it. And they have multiple paid plans. You just need to make sure you get the one that is HIPAA compliant if you need a HIPAA compliant solution. And then a last example of how you can use Google Forms is you can ask your employees or colleagues how to share information related to a project. This is for your internal teams, depending how big you are, whether you're working in a nonprofit, small business, big business. Sometimes you're in an idea gathering phase and trying to gather all of that, like as a raise your hand around the table, may not be, as productive a use of time, whereas you can send out a survey and have them share their ideas or opinions that way. So I'm going to talk super high level about Zapier for automation. And simply because once you've mastered Google Forms, the next step is automation. Since we're talking about improving the efficiency of your business, Zapier can be a very powerful tool. So Zapier is an online automation tool that connects apps and services. For those on the webinar who may not be very technical, you can just ignore this. For those who are technical and interested in it, this is a little jiffy kind of showing how Google Forms, and they're using GitHub as their ticket solution, is in work. So this was a demo that was available on the internet that I'm just brought here to show you. There's quite a bit of steps to setting it up, and they have a lot of demos, but Zapier allows you to connect disparate tools. So to give you an example of how I use it, as I mentioned earlier, I have my client intake form. From the client intake form, when someone fills it out, that client information is then automatically uploaded to my invoicing system. So that saves me a few minutes of having to manually enter all that information in, and in my case, typing it wrong because now I'm manually entering it again. But again, every few minutes that you save every day, especially as a small business owner, really does add up over time. And so if you're into automation and you're looking for ways to try to make your life a little easier, Zapier can do that if you have the tech savvy to kind of work through it. It's not necessary. This is just showing you how you can use it. So before I hop into the live demo, any questions so far or anything in particular anybody wants me to cover?
Nalini, we do have a couple of questions that I think it's useful to take before the before we get to the demos. We do have a question from James. I'm aiming to build an online counseling practice. I want to have an intake form and consent form. Can I create them using Google Forms? I heard it's like Excel. Excel is like kryptonite to me.
So the Google Forms itself is not Excel, so that's the good news. As far as the Google Sheets is your Excel equivalency, here's the good news. You don't actually have to do much with the Excel or the Google Sheets, so it hopefully wouldn't be kryptonite for you because Google Forms creates it. Now, you mentioned that it's a consulting or a coaching practice. I think the question for you becomes, is the information you're gathering covered by HIPAA? If it is, then you're going to probably want to look at Jot Forms for the HIPAA compliance portion of it. And if you don't need Google HIPAA compliance, then you can use Google Forms. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. And in this case, he does need, he says he does need HIPAA compliant forms. So I think Jot Form is what he's looking for.
Yeah.
Another question, can you customize a Google Sheet allowing you to brand your form or business?
So I want to first clarify, there's Google Forms and there's Google Sheets. Yes, you can customize the Google Form so it's branded for your business so that it looks the way you wanted, colors, logos, and I'll show you some of that. The Sheets itself is going to just be a raw an Excel spreadsheet. And when I get into the demo, the distinction will be easier for you to see. Something to keep in mind is the Forms is purple and the Google Sheets is green, just like Excel. So if you think of green like Excel as a spreadsheet, Google Sheets is green just like that. And Forms is probably, I have no idea what the Microsoft equivalency of Forms is, but it's definitely purple.
One related question on the whole HIPAA issue, and it's a fairly long question, so I think you'll be able to see it too. Mm-hmm. But it's from Anne. I just researched this issue yesterday. Is the other company safer? No software solution can be truly HIPAA compliant, as HIPAA compliance depends on the actions of all users. However, Google does support HIPAA compliance, and Google Forms is covered by its business associate agreement. Therefore, Google Forms can be considered a HIPAA compliant solution that is suitable for use in healthcare. Is Google Forms HIPAA compliant? Question mark.
So that's a very technical question, and I'm seeing it in the chat. My understanding is Google Forms, it's not HIPAA compliant, and my understanding is because of how the technicalities of how the information is transmitted. Google Forms itself is secure when you're filling it out online. However, part of HIPAA compliance involves masking the information as it comes through email, and Google Forms does not mask the information. Meaning, if someone fills out, my name is Nalini Goolsarran and I live at 123 Bridge Street, that information is visible in your email. And part of HIPAA compliance requires that that information is masked and you can't actually see that. You'll see that there's a submission, but it's either blurred out or blocked or something like that. And I just did a I just did a Jot Forms implementation for a dental practice that needed HIPAA compliance. And we did do Jot Forms and the information is masked via email. And so that it is compliant in that aspect.
Very, very helpful on the distinction there. Just a couple more before we move on.
Sure.
There's a quick question here on how does a client with a Yahoo email easily open the Google form?
So the Google form is opened via just a link. So they don't necessarily have to have a Gmail. Where they have to have a Gmail is if your form requires them to upload documents. And the reason being is if they have to upload documents, that document's actually stored in their Google Drive and it's just a link to you as the recipient. So the Ferguson Library in Stanford did this earlier during the pandemic. This was this was the exact scenario where, because they were asking folks to upload photos related to how they were surviving the pandemic, it forced them to log in with a Gmail. Now, if you don't actually create something where they need to upload any documents, it doesn't matter what email they have. But if they do have to upload documents, then they'll need a Gmail account.
Maybe I'm kind of related on the similar kind of topic. When someone shares a document with you, how do you get back to that document when they update it at a later time?
That's a very good question. And that's actually, when we get into the demo, I'll show it to you. You can access it via the same link that they gave you, that you gave out, which will give the outward facing, like the client facing link. Or if you're looking for the results, you will go to forms.google.com. And then since they're saying document, I'm assuming it's any Google document. And then if it's, then it's docs.google.com or sheets.google.com.
Right. And then just to follow up on the can you brand question, just a clarification there that Sheets is internal and then Forms is outward facing is the question. Is that correct?
Yes, that's a very good way to differentiate it. So the form is what your outward facing audience is seeing, and then the Sheets is absolutely internal, what you're working with as a team.
Okay, that's great. So can Google Sheets be used on the platform, example, Merle? I'm not sure if I got that right, but you can.
Yeah, sorry to call you by your name, Leslie. If you don't mind, I'm not familiar with Mural. Do you have another example of which platform you have in mind? Is that a web browser? I don't think I've heard of Mural before.
Okay, maybe we can come back to that. So I think let's move forward with the first demo.
Okay, sure. All righty. All right, so I'm actually already logged in here. This is what it looks like, but I'll just show you. If you go to your browser and you type in forms.google.com, and in my case, it autofilled because I go to Forms very often. It brings me here. Now, I have two different Gmail G Suite accounts. One of them is personal, identified by my face. The other one's for the business. And so I'm going to switch over to the business one. And you can actually see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 forms that are actually live and active right now. But we're going to go over to the business side so we can see. For many of you that are business owners, you're going to be using G Suite. I understand from just some research that there is a differentiation between Google Forms for G Suite and Google Forms for personal. I myself, again, I use it on both sides and I haven't personally seen the exact distinction. So I don't exactly know what features, if you get more or less. I just know that they do ask you to select, are you using this for personal or business? So when you first log in, at the very top, you have what's called your template gallery. And I'm going to give you a little tour of Google Forms, just kind of the interface before we get into the demo so you're comfortable with it. So when you get to forms.google.com, across the top here is where I'm highlighting. It's where you see start a new form. Remember earlier I mentioned the big plus sign. You can't miss it. right here, blank document to get started. But what Google's done to make your life a lot easier is they've created what's called a template gallery. So if I open up the template gallery, you can see there's so many different forms that people use commonly, and we're gonna do some of these. Like they even use them in education for quizzes and course evaluations and things like that. And to some of the questions that came earlier around organization, if you look at these templates, they're all distinctly different from a color and branding layout. There are some limitations. You cannot change the font, but you can change the header, which is where the photo is. You can change the color scheme. That's kind of about it in terms of customization, which as far as branding goes, it's not ideal. Traditional brandists will tell you that you should have the right fonts and stuff. But in this case, you can customize the colors and the imagery. And that's about as far as you'll get from a branding perspective. Now, sometimes you may come here, if you've come here before and you made your template gallery go away, and you're going, I don't see that, Nalini. You go over to the left side where you've got your 3 lines. On the way left of the screen, it says main menu. Down, 4th down in this case, it says settings. And then here you can see templates. It says display recent templates on the home screen. And there they are. So in case you made them disappear by accident, you can find them again in your settings over here. For someone earlier who asked, how do I find something like a document or something that was shared with me, depending on what it is, docs, sheets, slides, or forms, they're all visible here from your main menu. But since we're in forms, we're gonna stick around right here. Moving across the top, you've got search. Now this is very important, but once you get very savvy with Google Forms and you've got tons of forms and you're looking for something in particular, you can search for what you're looking for. We go all the way over to the right side of the screen. The very edge of the screen, we've got where it says G Suite. This is where you're switching accounts. So I've got my business email and I've got my personal, which are logged into my Chrome browser, which is why they're both there. To the left of that is the matrix of all the different G Suite apps and stuff. I don't really use this, but if you use it, great. But here's all the different things Google have to offer that they're making it easy for you to get to. So coming over to Google Forms, the first demo that I'm going to show you is a client intake. Many of us on this call are business owners, and you probably need to, as we mentioned, get some client information. Now you can go through the templates and find one you want to customize, which you can start right there. I'm going to start from scratch because it's just sometimes easier so you can see if you're starting from scratch what you need to do. So I'm going to click the plus sign for blank. And here we go. Remember the 7 steps? First, you create your form. Then you give it a title. Okay. Now my form has a title. Now I need to answer the questions. But before that, I can actually, and I've got my handy dandy Grammarly telling me I spelled it wrong. That is not common. If you don't have Grammarly installed, which is this little green circle, that spell check that just happened, you won't see. That's just a Chrome add-on I have, just for anyone looking for the green circle. Underneath your title, you've got your form description. If it's important, please fill out any information here. One thing that I found important to me is that I have to actually tell people to please spell your email correctly. You would not believe how many times people have actually misspelled their emails, and then when I'm sending contracts and invoices, it's not arriving because there was a typo when they were filling out this form. Again, human error, it can happen. So the very first question, and I'm actually going to pause here for a second because this wasn't in my demo, but in this case where you need to collect emails because Google Forms is set up the way it is, when you go all the way over at the top, you've got your customized theme on the right, if you can see my mouse, where the little color palette is. There's your eyeball where you can preview your form. The next is your settings, which is the gear icon, and then send, which gives you the URL as we mentioned. Then lastly, these 3 little dots give you more answers like pre-filled links, print it, move it to trash, those things. I don't use this section very often, honestly. If you are working with a team and you need to add a collaborator, you can. One thing missing from here that I've had someone ask me before, because many of us have multiple emails, if you accidentally create your Google form in the wrong email, there is no easy way to transfer that form to the new email to own it. So for example, you may have noticed over here, my new client engagement form for my business is under my personal account, because when I first started using Google Forms, I totally missed that. And now it's stuck on my personal side just because I don't feel like recreating it. And that's only for me. I don't need to worry about it. But if I wanted to, what I could do is add my business email as a collaborator, and then my business has access to it without having to only access it from the personal side. So in this case, this is one way to get around it without having to create the whole thing all over again. But one of the things, the reason I'm showing you this navigation is particularly in the settings section. When you go to settings, the very first option is collect email addresses and then response receipts. So what that means is that the person who filled it out will receive a copy of the email with their responses. I particularly like this feature because people like to know that their form was successfully submitted. They have a copy, you have a copy. So the person who asked earlier about whether or not there's a sign-in, so I can say restrict it to users in my organization. So this is if this is specifically internal to my business and only myself and people with a edge-based marketing email can access it. Or I can make it limited to one response. I can turn both of those off. The reason you may want to limit it to one response is that if you're doing a survey, or if you have a voting system and you don't want people to cheat or vote more than once, or they're taking a quiz, they should only be able to fill out the form one time. On my new client engagement form, I have both of these turned off because I need anybody in the public who I give the link to be able to fill it out. And I also sometimes have clients that filled it out one time and they were requesting one type of service. And then sometimes they come back and they're filling it out again because it's a different type of service or information has changed and the contract needs to be written to a different organization or something. So I don't limit it to one response because sometimes I do have scenarios where clients need to fill it out a second time. They can also edit after submit. Now, I actually have this turned off on my client information. The reason being is that I use the Google Sheets as a master spreadsheet of my business pipeline. So whether or not people actually went through on their contract, those kind of things. And also because I'm using it to create the contracts, I don't really want to see misinformation between my form and the actual contract. So I actually turn that off. So they cannot edit after they submit. This is your personal choice. It depends on what you're doing. So you would choose whether or not you want that on or off. And then lastly, do you want your respondents to see the summary charts and text responses? I have this turned off because I do not want them seeing what other people have submitted. So the only reason you really come in here is to make sure you've turned off anything that you don't need, and then you turn on your email collections if you need email addresses so that they can get a copy of their responses. There are a couple other options here that I don't particularly use. So presentation. So this is how you want it to look. So if you have multiple pages, you can show them a presentation bar. If it's an actual quiz, you can, or a survey, you can shuffle the question order. I don't do this. I don't have a necessary reason to shuffle the questions. And then here's the link if they want them to submit another response. So for people who are submitting tickets, when we get to the work tickets, that's the same client's going to be submitting work requests repeatedly. You probably want them to have another link if they have multiple issues they're submitting at the same time. And then of course there's a message here that you can send them, or I use the default Google Forms message. And then lastly, we've got quizzes. So this is for folks that are in education that need to make this a quiz. So you would turn that on and you actually can use that. My father is a teacher and he's used Google Forms, and there's Google Classrooms that they also use to do quizzes. So if it's a less formal thing that you can use Google Forms for, you can actually make it a quiz, but this isn't. So I'm going to double check that everything's what I'm looking for. And then I'm going to click save. And there we go. Now notice now email has popped up right here. And it actually says that this form is collecting email addresses. And if you didn't want to do that, Google Forms allows you to just easily change it again. So as a quick reminder, because I went through a lot just now, once you name your form, if you need your form to collect emails, you go to your gear icon up the upper right, and then you turn on collect email addresses. And if you want them to receive a receipt of their responses, and then save. So now we're going to customize our form. So the first question is, I want to know your name, right? And I want first and last name together. Or I can make this first name alone and last name alone. You'll notice that once I filled in the name of the field, it changed automatically from a multiple choice. I don't know if you guys caught that. This was previously a multiple choice to now it's a short answer text. Google has artificial intelligence working in the background to help you and make it easier. So in this case, it's changed it knowing that I'm asking for a name is not going to be multiple choice, that someone should be able to fill that in. And if I check my drop down here, here's where I can change it to other types of options. And so we've got short answer, paragraph, multiple choice, checkbox, drop down. Here's the file upload I mentioned, the linear scale, multiple grid choice, checkbox grid choices, dates and times. So again, different reasons for you to have this form filled out. I'm going to go ahead and here on the right side, there's an add question, import questions. I've personally not used the import questions feature, so I can't really speak to that. For anybody interested in that, I'd have to do some research afterward because I've not used it myself. You got add title and description, which is if you're creating multiple pages, you can actually put in, this is a new page or section, right? It's just a title and description box. I've had people ask that, like, what is this and how does it work, right? It's not an entry for the clients. And I'm actually going to do, if I hit my eyeball in the upper right corner, here's how you see it just so far. Someone can enter their email, right? Just showing you. This was the new title that I entered, so there's nothing to do here. And then here's where I'm entering my name. And then I can actually choose if I don't want to receive the responses. And then I would click submit. Down here on the right, you can see it says page 1 of 1. So just to show you how the preview looks. So as you're going, sometimes it's very important to check it as you go. So let's close this for a second. And I'm going to leave the form. That's okay. Actually, no, let me cancel that. Yep. Because right here. So let's go ahead and close that. Let's click leave because I didn't submit it. Here I am in edit mode. It's interesting because the form has a title here, but you also want to change your title in the upper left side. There we go. I just clicked it and it pulled it over. And if you'll notice here, it says all changes are saved in your Google Drive. So I'm just going to pause here for a second so that you can see that it's auto saved. And I'm going to go over here to the left side where it says Forms Home. And here's my new form. One thing to note is that by default, your Google Forms are organized and based on when you most recently accessed them. You can change them to sort by title if you need them in alphabetical order. The reason this is modified by me versus opened by me is because, like, for example, both these two forms here are shared with me from other people. I'm a collaborator on those forms. So I'm going to pause here before we go any further because I know I covered a lot. Do you have any questions here or lots of questions here maybe?
Yeah, we do have questions, and maybe we'll just go back and pick up a couple of the questions that that we had before. The one from Leslie on Merle, and she's saying it is on the Whitespace online collaboration platform. I'm not sure if that helps you.
I'm not familiar with it. Leslie, if it's similar to Slack, I'm going to go with you could probably use it because it's a URL. The answer is you can use Google Forms as long as whoever is receiving it has an active internet connection. Because I'm not too familiar with Mural or the that particular online collaboration platform. I've used Slack, and we use Google Forms in Slack sometimes.
Okay. And then we also had one general question from prior to the demo. Is a Google form link unique to each data entry?
No, it is one link. It's the same link for each form, and then the responses will be in the same Google spreadsheet. So it's the same link over and over again. The link doesn't change.
Okay. And then a question relating to the forms. Is there a way to assure that a human is filling out the forms I create with this tool?
That's a very, very good question. Because it's Google, they have something called reCAPTCHA running in the background. And I'm not exactly familiar with how that specific technology works. But what I will say is for anybody who is using the Google form, I have not seen myself or any of my clients receive spam through the Google form. So my answer is I believe Google is doing stuff in the background to make sure it's humans filling it out and not robots, simply because I've not gotten spammed through these forms. I have gotten spammed through other platforms, like even Jotform. There's now they've gotten smart where it's not even a bot spamming me. There's an actual human filling out the form and spamming me, like asking me if I need collaborators and stuff. That's what I mean. But I don't get the garbage spam regarding inappropriate things, which we've seen on regular like WordPress forms.
Okay, and a follow-up question on Google Links. So if someone enters his info and then revises that info, is that a second data entry?
I don't believe so. We can test it. Again, that's if you allow them to edit after submission. As I mentioned, I don't allow edit after submission, so I don't know firsthand how that works. So we can test that. But if you do allow edit after submission, my inclination is the same entry line will be edited that was previously edited, but we can test that and figure out how that works.
Okay. A question on the forms. Can the form be free formatted? Leslie has forms that have already been developed. Will I be able to create them?
Leslie, when you say free formatted, you mean like you import the questions for them? I'm assuming she'll take a minute to come back. We'll come back to that one, Bob.
Yeah, okay. And then another question here. I'm from Hazel. I'm an educator. I teach Mandarin Chinese. I like to use forms for quizzes and tests. Can I create the forms in a foreign language, and will Google Sheets collect the information in designated language correctly?
That's a very good question, Hazel. I'm actually not certain. I've never used Google Forms to translate. We can check the settings, and if you don't mind, I'll take that away. And if you could private message me, I don't know if you're allowed to, or email me, and I can email you an answer on that. And so, because I'm not certain, I know Google Translate, like Google has a translate plugin for websites, but I haven't seen the translate form option, and that might be because I've never looked for it.
Okay, and we do have a clarification from Leslie. She's saying the form is already developed as a Word document.
Got it. So Leslie, in your case, that's probably where this import question comes in. So I just click, if you notice, it says import questions, and it looks like it's only importing it from Google Forms. So to answer your question, let me see. Yeah, it looks like you would have to manually type it up. If you already have forms, like you said, free formatted because they're already created, you can potentially import them in Jotforms. I've actually imported my Google form into Jotform as a test. I know we're doing a Google Form demo, but for your specific question, Jotform might be a better solution for you so that you don't have to manually create them. What I will say is that as with most technology, it's not perfect. So the time it takes to reformat the questions after they've been imported, you may be better off creating them from scratch again. It just depends on how the tool anticipated the information and then laid it out.
Very helpful. So I think that's it for now. So let's maybe go on into our next demo.
Sure. And actually, before we get into the demo, I just wanted to show really quickly, when you click responses here, you've got question, you've got responses, and here we have 0 responses, which we know. See this little green box here? This is where we create the spreadsheet. When I click that, we're going to create a new spreadsheet called, and in this case, new client intake form responses. And you can name it whatever you want so that you can find it later. Or you can, if you have an existing spreadsheet that you want to combine it with, you can. And then you click create. And it automatically opens you up in Google Sheets. And so you'll notice here we've got the timestamp that the form was filled out in, the email address, and the name, first name, last. Now I want to show you something. I'm going to close this for a second. I'm going to go back to my questions. And I'm going to add another question here. So I'm going to click on first name, last name. I'm going to click my plus sign. So it's going to add it beneath it. And this is where I want their phone number. And it changed automatically to a short answer. it needs to be a required question. See the little required box? Like, oops, I forgot to make the name required. Let's make that required. I'm gonna add one more that, because maybe just to show you something else where the check boxes are appropriate. So in this case would be services required, and it's multiple choice. And you'll notice Google anticipated what I wanted and it created check boxes without me having to go create them. And I've got, you know, social media, add another option. I've got websites, if it lets me type in there. Right, you type it here, here we go. Web development. And when you hit enter, it automatically creates the last one. And then let's just go with SEO. I can even create, you see it says add option on the left where you type, or on the other side you add other, which is automatically other. Now, I don't want this above my phone, so I'll just grab it from the top here where the dots are. So again, where the dots are, just move it down to where I need it. Now, I wanted to show you this so that I can show you your Google Sheets. If I go to responses and I click on my spreadsheet icon again, you'll notice now that there's column D has phone number and column E has services required. So as you add columns to your form, the corresponding columns are created in the spreadsheet. So for the person earlier that was concerned about the spreadsheet being their kryptonite, this has taken some of the work out of it. Now I'm just gonna quickly do a preview, make sure it looks good, and I'm gonna fill it out so that you can see the responses populate in the spreadsheet. And then that and other, testing the form. I want to copy to myself. I'm going to click submit. And that's it. And then I can actually submit another response if I wanted to. Now, because I had it set to, you can submit more than one responses, it's allowed me to do it again. Now, if I go back to my spreadsheet here, and I click, notice I didn't even click refresh. I just opened up the spreadsheet. So for the person who asked me earlier, how fast does the spreadsheet refresh? This was submitted at 12:46 p.m. and the current time is 12:47 p.m. So in about 15 seconds, my spreadsheet was populated. So while I go ahead to set up the next demo, Bob, are there any other questions?
Yeah, just one more from Jennifer. Can I upload a JPEG file into a field on the form? I'd like to use Google Forms to send art proofs to my customers, one proof per job. So it sounds like a new form for each proof.
Let's see. So let's add a new question. And actually there's an icon here where it says add image. And so here you can pull from your uploads, camera. So I'm just going to grab something from my hard drive really quick. Let's see. Here, I've just got this picture lingering. And then this could be proof number 1. And maybe what you can do, Jennifer, is that you can show them proof number 1, and then in your case, have a feedback box. And then it's a long answer text so that they can actually give you their feedback on that proof. Hopefully that gives you a real life example of how you could use that.
Okay, I think that's very helpful. So we'll move on here.
All right, so I'm just going to X out of this window here. I'm going to X out of the preview form here, and I'm going to X out of my responses just so that we don't have too many confusing windows. So now that I've come back and I'm actually, you'll notice I'm in my personal account again. Let's get out of there. Let's go into the business account. So in the business account, we've got a new client intake form. The next one that we're going to do is a work request. Now this one, I'm like, I don't want to start from scratch. Let's look at how it feels like to work from a template. So if we go to the template gallery, we're opening it up. You notice that there's all kinds of forms. If someone even has a job application form in here. Now, personally, I may be concerned with a job application because while it may not be HIPAA compliant, I still think data privacy laws apply. So just be careful if you're collecting private information like social security numbers and stuff, that you're not doing it in Google Forms, which could lead you into data privacy issues. So if you're just collecting general information, that's probably okay. So let's go to the work request so we can see what that looks like. So in our work request, we've got, well, let's start with customization because we didn't cover that in the last form. So you've got this really interesting landscape view at the top and some green. And let's say that has nothing to do with your color palette. So up at the right, you got customized theme and like looks like a painter's palette. You're gonna grab that. And you'll notice that you have a few different options. You can choose your font styling, which is new. Look at that. We actually have font styling. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't have this before. If I click playful, it changes it. So here you've got 4 font options. So during the presentation, I mentioned that you can't customize the font. While I can't change the font, apparently I can style it to be a little bit more of what I'm looking for. So this is new. This must have been released in the last 2 weeks because when I was prepping, I didn't have this feature. So there we go. So let's keep it on playful. That looks different. We can choose to upload an image from here, which is where you want to upload your own cover photo, but just be mindful of your dimensions. So I'm going to close that for a second. This is a very wide and short. It's very short in height, but very wide in view. And the reason that's important is that if you try to upload an image that doesn't quite look that way, where it's long and skinny, then it's going to resolve really weird. Like your logo may not necessarily work in that format. So what you can do is you can use the stuff that Google provides for you. For example, let's say, so that's work and school. So let's pick the category, let's see, other maybe. And in other, perhaps your business is, it needs to be a little bit more professional without being so, what's the word, flirty. But in this case, let's go with this because you can see that there's a little action in it. They have a little butterfly and a green background. And you'll notice that the themes of the entire form automatically change to match your photo. So you don't have to spend a ton of time matching all your colors up. Google then decided that these are the main colors in the photo, and perhaps you would like one of these colors instead. So let's go with orange. Orange is nice. So we've got our work request form. You have some information here about in emergencies, please contact this number or this email. And so you've got personal info with an optional description. This again is the title slide of the section. You've got name, email, please describe the problem, summary. Now for my business, I might think that that's redundant. Let's say you don't need to describe the problem because you already have a summary. You just click the little trash icon when I clicked on it and it's gone. If you have multiple locations or offices or something like that, you can keep this. Now, what you can say here is, let's say you're a plumber and you need to know specifically which room is the problem in, right? And then you can change the short answer to a multiple choice or a checkbox. Let's go multiple choice because we haven't done that yet. We've got kitchen, bathroom, master bath, basement, right? Those are some plausible. Again, you know your business and what you need this information for. And then I spelt this all wrong. Let's try that again with a question mark. Is the problem in? And notice how easy it is just to edit and modify the questions as you go. And it's interesting because now we've got which room is the problem in, and then you've got the type of problem kind of pre-filled here based on this work request. And you might say, you can change this, change the title to whatever else you want to add to it. You can change the options just by clicking on them or Xing them out. There is an image icon where you can upload an image to go with it. I will say, don't go crazy with the images simply because unless it's absolute necessary, it sometimes clutters up the form and it makes it harder for the form to be read. So that is one thing that could be problematic. Priority, due date, more details. Again, these are pre-filled, but you can continue to add. And so here's some examples of where the date can come in. If this is a high priority, particularly if somebody's submitting 7 and 10 requests, you might want to know what's high priority and low priority. So this gives you some idea if you're not too familiar. Sorry, I just saw the question, Bob. I think it's good. how do the results look, and does it show the entire view of a printed form? So if we were to go to responses, right now this one's waiting for responses. So let's do a quick preview. Let's fill it out really quick before we run out of time. I'm just kind of filling in whatever, just so that we can kind of get through. Okay, and then if I click submit, now I know I put in a junk email address, so that won't go anywhere. But if I go to the responses, so you would be able to view your responses here, which is in the summary, right? And so this will be where you saw everybody's responses, and then you can see the responses aggregated by question. Or, so if I want to see, like, for example, particularly around which room is the problem in, you could start to see like how many times our bathrooms a problem, etc. And if you went by the individual, for Leslie, here's your question, here's how it looks based on that one specific individual response. And if we were to go to the spreadsheet really quickly, we're going to create a new one. And then there you can see the responses have all been filled in based on what I just put in, including the garbage email. So we've got about 5 minutes left. Do you want to take some more questions, Bob?
Yeah, we can, just a reminder, if you do want to submit a question, we have a couple minutes left, and you can do it through the chat feature. And while people do that, we do have one from Michelle. How can you change from graph to one lines?
How can you change from graph to one lines? And so going back here to your responses.
Other responses, yeah,
yeah,
where you had graphs.
Yep. So you have your summary, which is here, which is like the graphs and the what'll be the aggregate. And then you can see it by individual questions or by the individual person. Or as we mentioned before, once you click your spreadsheet icon, it'll take you to your Google Sheet.
Yeah, and so I think in summary, I think what Michelle's after is the one-line responses would be to look at it in the Google Sheets would be, yes, the desired.
Yep, sorry. Yes, in the Google Sheets right here.
Another follow-up question for Jennifer. How do you get notified that a person has submitted a form?
Yeah, so that one can get a little tricky, and that's a very, very good question. So we already know it's not in settings, and we know it's not in the forms. You actually get notified on the Sheets side, and it's under Tools. So once you create your sheet, you go to Tools, and you see Notification Rules right here. And then you can see Notify Me at the email that I created with. Anytime a change is made, so this is if you allow somebody to edit the form, a user submits a form, and then you want it as a daily digest or right away. I have it set up as right away, and sometimes you may want it as a daily digest. And then I click save.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful. Just a follow up on the question Michelle asked earlier about changing from graphs to one line. She said, I thought you could change the graph in the summary page because she thought she did it by accident one time. So would that be possible, changing it in the summary page?
I think it has to do with the view options, maybe on the summary page. It might not be visible here just because we don't have enough information or enough responses. It also depends on what type of questions you ask. So sometimes you may not be able to. Michelle, if you want to email me separately, we can kind of go down a rabbit hole and see if we could replicate that scenario.
Okay, I think that's, we don't have any more time for questions, so I think we're gonna wrap it up here. And what we'll, just a reminder before I wrap up, their session has been recorded on the webinar, and I know Nalini went a little quickly sometimes, so you can listen to the recording, which will be up on our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org. And also a reminder of our next live webinar a week from today, October the 6th at noon. And the topic is Beyond the Business Card Exchange, especially in a virtual world, with Rob Thomas presenting. And again, if you would like free individual mentoring, you can use the link on the screen, or you can go to our website and click Request a Mentor, and someone will get back to you within 24 to 48 hours. And if I could also remind you to fill out your evaluation forms that are being sent to you as we going through the webinar, they're very helpful to us. So on behalf of SCORE, I'd like to thank everyone for attending our live webinar today. And in particular, a big thank you to Nalini for presenting. So stay well, everyone, and have a great day.